Welcome to day 3. This is day 3 of me live streaming to both YouTube and Facebook. I think yesterday that I promised you that I was going to do a rundown of the software platform that I'm using to do simultaneous live streaming. It's called Wirecast, but I'm not going to do that, and here's why. Because I want to slow down a little bit on that and take the time to do a really good screen capture video for you and then jump on here live and share that with you. Now, that is quite a bit of work, so I'm not going to do that just yet. I'll probably wait a week or so and build some momentum around the idea of showing you how to use that. It's Wirecast. I think I paid $500 for the software. I bought it specifically for the reason of being able to simulcast to several different sites at the same time. I will tell you this. If you decide to get involved with Wirecast or you're checking it out before we get to that video, you need to know that you need to have really good upload speeds on your internet. I have about 25 megabytes or Mbps that I'm paying for, and I'm usually in that range, 20 to 25. I think you need at least 15 to be able to push to 2 different platforms like Facebook and YouTube. So just keep that in mind. Do your research before you get involved in that if you decide to jump on that before I can get to it and share it with you. But here's what I am going to share with you today. So every week, one of my goals is to create training that I can hand stuff off to my team. And today what I'm going to share with you is a huge project that I've been meaning to hand off for quite some time because it is just a mind-sucking and time-sucking endeavor, and it's my podcast workflow. So the title of this video today was how to do 2 hours worth of work in 10 minutes. So I'm going to show you in just a second how I do that. Now, basically what I'm doing is I am outlining every step of the podcasting process, post-production process, which means I'm still going to have to do the interviews. I'll have to do the webinar and the pre-work and all of that kind of stuff, which I love doing. I love being able to get ready for an interview or doing a solo podcast. I love it. The post-production stuff is mind-numbing, and that's what hangs a lot of people up when they do this whole process. Now, before I dive in and show you my process, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, here's all you need to know. Search Pat Flynn podcast tutorial. Pat Flynn is one of my heroes in the space. The guy does an incredible job of podcasting, but he has a step-by-step tutorial that's free. Pat Flynn podcasting tutorial. It's what we've used both times when we've gone and set up our podcast. So what I'm going to jump into today is show you my workflow. So before I do that, let me take a big step back from this. And the bigger idea here is not how we do our podcast flow. So I want to make sure that I am communicating to you the big idea here. The big idea is creating training that makes it really easy for you to hand off tasks and responsibilities to other people. And if you do this part right, what really happens is you reduce the skill level required of the person doing the task. So ordinarily, we would need to hire a podcasting firm to do everything we're talking about here. But between our internal people and the people that we're using as freelancers, we can do this for a lot less money because we're taking the time to slow down and step-by-step walk people through each part of it. In fact, one of the trainings I'm going to create in this is how to edit a podcast using Audacity, which is a free software program, and nail it every time. And I've already got my intros and outros in a template in Audacity, and all I've got to do is import my audio. So I'm always looking for efficiencies, and the ultimate efficiency in any business is to spend more time doing something once so that you never have to do it again. Okay, so every time I do a podcast, I'm spending 2 hours on it. When I get done building this training, I will be able to hand this thing off within 10 minutes. So let's dive over there. Let's dive in and take a look at what that looks like. Okay. So this is my document here, my checklist. This is in Trello. You'll see at the top here, Trello.com. It is a free project management software. We use it just about every day. You can share your Trello boards with your team. We have separate Trello boards for our teams. Let me just show you this. I don't think there's anything sensitive on here. This is kind of what it looks like, the Trello board. I know you can't see that very well because I had this set up just to do what we're working on today. Which is funny now. I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is what a checklist looks like in there. Now, this checklist really involves 2 things. It's my checklist that I had to put together so that I build the checklist correctly. And then once I'm done, once I get this last thing clicked off here, create IFTT notifications or folders, I'll be done with this and I'll delete this part of it. Now, if you don't know what IFTTT is, you need to go check that out. It's ifttt.com. If this, then that. So basically what I'll create is a notification there where when we drop audio into a file, it notifies our podcast editor. And then when he takes that and edits it, drops it back into the completed file, it notifies us that he's done it. Now, we're also going to duplicate those efforts by reaching out and saying, hey, there's one in there to edit, but we want to make sure that that stuff's happening automatically. I use IFTT for a million different things. That's just a side note. But when somebody sends me an email that I want to make sure that I follow up with quickly because I don't read email, I will go into IFTT and create a sequence where when I get an email, like from my bookkeeper, that it sends me a text message so I know to go in and check on that, okay? That was a little ADD rabbit trail right there, but I think it was valuable, maybe. Okay, let's keep moving. Let me scroll down here. So Richard, okay, so this is what I want you to see from this. Before, I did all of this, most of this. Jessica, my assistant, helped me with bits and pieces of it. But for the most part, this was all on me, especially the podcast engineer part of it. And I just don't have time to do that, and I'm not very good at it. So there's two reasons for me not to do it. In this case, all I got to do is drop the raw podcast added to shared Dropbox folder, which is what I was mentioning a second ago. Upload the raw audio to Trent. We will take the audio from the podcast, upload it to a site called Trent.com. Trent.com has a machine that transcribes audio and video. So that's where the transcription hats. When they're done with that, it actually sends me an email, okay? Or it sends an email to my inbox, which Jessica checks. Add description to the text file for template. That's misspelled description is. What that means is every podcast has a description. I just need to make sure that I'm the one that adds that. Nobody else can do that. Again, I'm trying to do what only I can do and hand off everything else. Then I message Jessica and the podcast engineer that I put that content in there and add the transcription from Trent to the appropriate list. I can do that, or Jessica can do that. When you upload to Trent, you can't add something to a folder until it's done transcribing. So it takes about 4 or 5 minutes to fully transcribe that document. And I'd say they're probably 90 to 93% accurate, and it's going to misspell your name, those kind of things. But it works all in all. And basically what we do with that content is we add it to the bottom of the podcast post. So when we put the podcast post on our blog, at the bottom, we have a hidden field where we put the transcription in there, and that helps us with SEO. And then the podcast engineer edits the podcast, does the tagging and descriptions. There's a whole process you have to go through, uploading stuff to iTunes. He converts it to an MP3. It's important that before we upload it to the hosting site that it's an MP3 format. Most of it comes out in a different format off of the recorder that we use to record the podcast. Libsyn is our audio hosting syndication program. So Libsyn costs me about $15 a month, and you can upload something like a gajillion megabytes of data. It's what we use for that. LastPass login means we're giving access to our audio engineer through LastPass, which means if we part ways with that individual, he doesn't have access to our platforms. Then we'll save it to the completed file when he's done, and again, that'll send us a message through IFTT. Save the Libsyn link in the text doc. There's a text document that I walk through where it's step-by-step all of the information that we need in there. And again, these are the things that I tend to think nobody else can do. Let's see if I can grab that text file, if it's still available. Doesn't want to come up. And my least favorite thing is when people are doing trainings like this and they're not prepared. So I won't dive into that. So basically, I created a text document that has every piece of information that he'll need when he's tagging inside of iTunes to put in there. So it makes it super simple to do that. And then once he hands that off, Jessica's got to pay the podcast engineer. We pay this guy every time he does an episode for us. She'll create the blog post, the sessions page on the appropriate site. Again, we have 2 podcasts. She'll add the transcript to the bottom of the page. She'll add the Libsyn link to the blogcast post. So we take the link from Libsyn, which is hosting the audio, and put it on our WordPress site so that when somebody comes to that page, they can listen to it right there. But also iTunes grabs all that information from the blog post. It's set up automatically that when we post that blog post, It grabs all of the data, the description, the pictures, every bit of that stuff, the podcast art, as well as the link to the audio, which is being hosted by Libsyn. She'll create SEO-friendly show notes. That's one of the things that is probably hardest about this whole thing, is somebody listening to the podcast and creating show notes and links for things mentioned and that kind of thing. She'll schedule the post for an appropriate day. So we actually post on a schedule on Thursday mornings. We're a little bit off right now because we had this podcast engineer issue. But we post every Thursday morning, so we're just constantly adding things to the queue to be posted. Add the podcast session description to the shared Google Doc podcast index. One of the things that I set up with this was a Google Doc so that we can look back and see who was in each episode. Did I interview somebody? Did I do a solo podcast? What the link to the page on the site is for that, all of that kind of stuff. Email to list the episode when appropriate. When I first started doing blogging, I did it for an audience of one person. This is really important. Let me put myself back on screen here. This way I can look you right in the eyes. When I first started blogging, I did it for an audience of one. I would go out and I was doing church construction consulting. I'd go out and I'd meet with somebody. They would ask questions I didn't know the answers to. I'd come back out, find the answers out from a general contractor or an architect or whoever it was. And then I would write a blog post, and then I would grab that content, send it to the person that asked the questions. And at the same time, we would make it SEO friendly. So we're getting organic traffic. We'd give away my book on that page. So we're getting some lead opt-ins. And then what we would do is, as my list began to grow, we would take that blog post and send it out to the email list. So it's super important that you realize that whether you're blogging or you're doing video like this, you need to sit down before you dive into this, because early on, like this is day 3 of live streaming. I have no idea if this is going to work. So what we've got to do is we got to make sure that we have a plan to make this work if the primary objective doesn't work. If nobody ever watches these videos organically on Facebook or YouTube, that's okay, because we've got a plan. We've built a workflow just like the one I'm showing you today to make sure that we can leverage this content by transcribing it, putting it on the site, being able to share it with people who are asking questions, and just create content every day and upload and push it out, even if it's just primarily for an audience of one. Okay, let's keep going. Scrolling on down, email a list when appropriate, save the transcription to the shared folder under transcriptions. I've got shared folders on Dropbox where we save all this content so that we can have it in the future. Once everything's done, I usually move it off of Dropbox because it fills up pretty quickly. And one of the last thing here is compress the Dropbox sessions template, that whole file that has the audio and the description and the transcript, compress it and upload it to Amazon AWS. Amazon doesn't really charge you anything to host your content. They just charge you to download content. So we save a lot of stuff there, because if Amazon is no longer there, we're all in trouble. Okay, so we save stuff there, and then we save it to an external drive to make sure we have duplicate copies, and keeping in mind that the audio of that is saved on Libsyn. And then I move everything off that external file. And then the last thing I need to do is mark the completed podcast session folder off of Dropbox. So I basically, when everybody's done, I take it and I move it to an external file on my side. Jessica moves it to AWS. I move it to my side. So that really is everything that I have to do to be able to execute well on doing a podcast. Now, that we're 13, 14 minutes in. And here's what I want you to know. That may seem like an overwhelming amount of information. And again, I'm not really trying to teach you how to do a podcast workflow. What I am trying to get through to you is you have workflows like this that need to be created in your business. Okay, you probably need to take a time right now and just write down 3 of them. Write down 3 of those things and go and figure out which one of these things is going to make the biggest impact on my day-to-day business and execute on that thing. Okay, so whatever comes to mind first may not be the best thing to do, but make sure that you get these workflows. I usually reserve a half a day every week to do what I'm showing you here. Sometimes it takes a lot more time than that. I try not to do it, spend 3 or 4 days doing something like this, even though it would be worth it. I try to do it in chunks so that ultimately it gets me where we need to be. Go ahead and do that. Let me just say this, parting company. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. Make sure you like the page if you're on Facebook, and then you'll get notifications when I'm live. And most of you aren't going to watch this live. You're going to watch it after the fact. But every day I'm going to try to invest in you. Okay, so and all I ask in return is that when you have a question, no matter how simple or complex you think it is, ask it. Post it in the comments below. I'll create a video on it. I might have you on and we can dive in. One of the things that I think I'm going to start doing with my podcast, because I love doing it, is just coaching. And that might be me coaching you, bringing you on, and let's talk about your business, talk about where you are, talk about where you're stuck, and then maybe I can coach you through it. And then sometimes I'll bring people on to coach me because I don't know everything. So bring people on that they're a step or two ahead of me, and bring them on and have them drill me and ask me questions and help me clarify my direction. So if that's the kind of thing that sounds like it's interesting to you, or that you would want to keep up with, go ahead and subscribe or like the page, and I'll keep at this. The other thing I want to tell you is next week I'm going to Content and Commerce event out in California with Ryan Dice and their team. It's a big conference that we're going to out there. I'm going to live stream from the road. So I don't know if this is going to hit YouTube or not, or if we'll live stream to Facebook and then pull it down and stick it on YouTube after the fact, because I can only do simultaneous streaming from right here at my computer. So I'm not sure exactly how we'll do that, if we're all flip-flopping back and forth, but I'm sure we're going to be learning a ton. I'm going to be with a close friend of mine who sold a digital marketing company, Casey Graham. He was Infusionsoft Marketer of the Year a few years ago, and he and I are going to hang out for a few days, and I'm going to give you some of the nuggets that we're learning, and then I'm going to tell you some really important stuff about some things that you need to be doing as it relates to friends and mentors and those kind of things. Okay, that's it. I will catch you tomorrow on the podcast, where I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. Okay, thanks for being with me. I'll catch you tomorrow.